Hi, everybody. And we're on our 10th session of our journey. And as usual, we'll start with a recap. And we've done 9 letters already. And I've grouped them here into 2 main groups, the first 8 letters. The first 5 letters are the process of how the affluence gets from Hashem to us. And I'm not going to go through the whole process again. We've done it so many times. AlephBet Gimel, all the way they're the givers, to Dalet is the receiver, and then becomes the Hey when he's got the spirituality. And then the second part of the second group is the Vav Zayin Chet, which we go from looking at the plentiness of the physical plentiness in the Vav, and the pipe that spreads it out. Everything that's the 6 directions, the 6 days of the week. The Zayin, which is spirituality within the physical world, and the Chet, which was the 8, which is above the physical, the supernatural. And then we went on to, that's the second group. And last week we discussed the Tet, which is number 9. And what we said, that Tet is the last letter before you get to the Yud. The Yud, which we're going to discuss today, is 1 unit, 1 10. It's not just coincidental that we count on a basis of 10. And Tet is the multitude of disconnected points that aren't really coordinated, aren't really working in the same direction. And on that basis, we now come to our Yud. And we've actually mentioned the Yud many, many times, because the Yud is the source of all the other letters, right? All the other letters are made up of Yuds and Vavs. And the Vav is actually a long Yud, which makes all the other letters results of different derivatives of the Yud. So let's go through the normal 5 qualities. We actually look at 4 of them, because I don't have anything about the sound of the Yud. A lot of the letters, we don't have anything specific about the sound. First of all, the name Yud, there's no actually word Yud, but there is the word Yad, which we're all very familiar with. And the Yad, on the one hand, is a very small object, like it can be closed up. On the other hand, it can be extended. And the Yad could either mean the hand, it can also be the whole arm, right? Something called the Zura, but also sometimes called the Yad. So the Yad's got the ability of having a small source and extending. And this is an example, a symbol of strength that expands in all directions. Now, if we're talking about expanding, if you look at the word Yud, as you spell out the letter Yud, Yud, Vav, Dalet, you see over there we also see the expansion. Yud is just a dot. And if you extend the dot into one direction, you'll get a Vav, a long Yud. And if you extend it in 2 directions or 2 dimensions, you'll get the Dalet. So we see that there's a progression in the word Yud, Vav, Dalet, which goes hand in hand with the hand that symbolizes something that's small that can extend. The hand is actually the only part of the body that could be up or down, right? Normally, like, the person's head is on the top of his body, his feet are at the bottom. The hand depends where you put them. It could be in the middle of the body. They could be low down if you're bending down. They could be above your head. They have this ability to be wherever you want them to be. So all this is to do with the Yad and the Yud and the Yad. Secondly, we come to the numerical value, and the numerical value is 10. And as I said earlier, the 10 is a complete unit. The fact that we've got 10 hands, 10 fingers, we only have 2 hands, we have 10 fingers on the hands, so it causes us to count on the base of 10. And when we get to 9, we say that even though we write it here, that's 1 unit of 10 and then 0. It's not just coincidental, because we say that you need 10 people for a minyan, right? Dafka 10 and not 9 and not 11. And it's so often, right? You're sitting in shul and you got 9 people and you're just stuck, right? You can't say Baruch Hu and you can't say Kaddish and until the 10th person comes along. There's a joke once, many years ago, I heard about this guy who goes to a court overseas, and the judge, the non-Jewish judge, says to him, and what is your profession? He says, I'm a minyan man. He says, what? He says, a minyan man. He says, what is that? He says, well, if there are 9 people, then I come along, and then there's 10 people. So the judge looks at him very strangely. He says, wait a second. If there are 9 people and I came along, there'd also be 10 people. The guy's eyes light up and he gives the screen. He says, you're also Jewish? But it shows us what the specialness is about the number 10. Okay, the shape of the Yud. On the one hand, it's a small dot showing modesty and hidden secrets. Okay, first of all, why modesty? Because it's small, right? When somebody doesn't show how big they are, but is prepared to show that they're small, that's modesty. On the other hand, if somebody is sure enough about how great they are, they don't have to show off. They can afford to be modest. Okay, and this is a classic example of this is Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, Moshe in the Torah has at least 2 descriptions given to him by the Torah itself. The one is that Ish Moshe Anav Mikol Adam. The man Moshe is the most modest of all people. And the other description is that Lo Kam B'Yisrael, just before he dies, the Torah testifies that there hasn't been anybody in the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are considered the peak of selected, of the chosen of all people. And even in the Jewish people, there hasn't been anybody as great as Moshe. And normally you'd think that this greatness and this modesty don't really go together. There seems to be a contradiction. And the Torah tells us exactly the opposite. And there's the one explanation is, as I said earlier, is that if somebody knows his value, he doesn't have to flout it, he doesn't have to show it around. But the second explanation, which is a little bit deeper, explains that is the source of Moshe's greatness is his modesty. And the hint there is that Moshe is compared a little bit, maybe we discussed it when we spoke about the Dalet. The Dalet, we said, is the ultimate receiver. If you're the ultimate receiver, you'll take from everybody, and that'll make you great. Because Moshe was modest, each one of us, every single person in the world has a unique, at least one unique quality that nobody else has. Each of us is unique. And so often we talk to other people, we think how great we are, and we look at the other person. But Moshe's looking at other people was always looking at that unique point, not being jealous and saying, wow, that's one point that I could learn. So Moshe takes in Yosef's uniqueness and Avram's uniqueness and Yaakov's uniqueness. He takes on everybody's uniqueness. And because he's got the ability, the modesty to take this in, he becomes like a superset of all of these people together. And that's how he becomes the greatest of all people. And the rabbis say that Moshe is compared to the whole of Am Yisrael. His greatness is against the whole of Am Yisrael. So according to the explanation that we've just given, we can understand why. Because he's actually got a little bit of all Am Yisrael inside him, and that's his greatness. So that's the small dot that we see in Moshe, and Lahavdil, that's how you see it also in the Yud, which symbolizes Hashem. And I think it's just coincident that the word Hashem and Moshe have the same letters. I think we need to learn from that. But the Yud is small because Hashem is so great, we don't really comprehend him. On the other hand, he's the source of everything. Okay, we said it cannot be divided, just like Hashem. There's only one Hashem. Okay, Hashem is the ultimate one and cannot be divided. On the other hand, the Yud, if you look carefully, it does have three parts. They can't be divided, but it does have three parts. It has on the top a little point pointing upwards. On the bottom, it has a little arrow pointing downwards, and then it has the body. Reminds us a little bit of a small Aleph. When we spoke about the Aleph having the Yud on the top and the Yud on the bottom, here, compressed into the small area of the Yud, we have Hashem, which is actually the unifying force of everything in the world. To understand this idea of a unifying force, I'll share something that I actually learned this morning with my Chabrit in Shul about Arevim. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. We're all of Am Yisrael are responsible one for each other. And this can be seen in three different parts, three different examples or expressions. The one is if a person borrows money from another person, and the lender is concerned that he won't get the money back, so you can get a guarantor. And the guarantor is a third person who steps in and becomes instead of the lender. And the Rebbe Lubavitch, in the article that we are learning, he says there's two ways of looking at it. One way, the classic way of looking at it, is you can say the guarantor is just saying that if the guy hasn't got the money, then I'll step in and pay the money. But the other way of looking at it is he's not stepping in for the money. He's saying if the lender is not able to pay back, if he's not the person that he's promised to be, I will step in and be him instead. And therefore, anyway, I'll pay the money because I am him. And so this is a lot deeper example where somebody actually steps in instead of somebody else. You'll see how this ties into the Yud in a moment. Another example of being a guarantor is one person can do a mitzvah for another person. Let's say, for example, there's a mitzvah to blow the shofar or to hear the shofar. And I went to shul in the morning and I heard the shofar and I've made a bracha and I've done that mitzvah. I came home and my wife didn't get to shul. So I can blow the shofar for her, even though I've already fulfilled that mitzvah. Why can I do that? Because all the people of Am Yisrael, we are as if we were one. And therefore, if one person hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah yet, the other person fulfills it not only for them, but so to speak, for themselves, because we are actually one. And the third example is Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh, is that whenever somebody needs help, we'll always step in and help. It's similar to the first one, but it's used in a broader context, which is why the basis that we can send soldiers to war to risk their lives in order to save other people. Now, it's not a trivial thing to say that why should I risk one person's life to save somebody else's life? Normally we don't do that. You know, the words of the Gemara is his blood more red than the other person's blood. But because when we're talking about a war, we consider the whole of Am Yisrael as one unit, like a minyan, one unit altogether. And therefore, just like if a person was in danger and he lifts up his hand to protect his face, his hand wouldn't say, well, why should I endanger myself to protect the face? I'd rather protect my hand, because the whole body is one unit and every part of the body will protect every other part of the body. And that's the idea of sending soldiers to a war, or one Jew risking his life even for another Jew, because we're all part of one unit. Now, why have we brought all these ideas of Arevut? Because the thing that actually makes us Arevim, makes us actually care and take responsibility one for each other, is actually the connection to the Yud inside us. Okay, if we think 100% logically, and all of us have our own physical lives, we've got our own families to worry about, and we've got our own financial issues to worry about, there's no logical reason why I should give charity and definitely why I should risk my life for somebody else. But we do it. And the reason why we do it is because we say that even though my body is different to your body, my neshama comes from the same source. My neshama is actually part of Hashem, which is same as your neshama. And that brings us one together, brings us all together. And that is the Yud, right? The Yud is the little point, the little, what the old Yiddish is saying is the pintel Yid, okay? The little dot that is the Yud, okay? And it's interesting that the word Yid, Jew, sounds very similar to Yud, right? That's what makes us the Jew. The neshama inside us that says that I'm not separate from other Jews, that I'm one and the same thing. And we'll come now to the fifth quality, and that's the first word in the Torah that begins with the letter Yud, and it's in the third pasuk of the third verse of the Torah. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayehi or. Okay, the creation, the first creation was light, and light is the source of everything. Okay, and that light was created with the Yud, yehi or. And I actually wrote in brackets the first creation, but it's actually all the subsequent creations also, because it says yehi rakia b'toch hashamayim. Everything began with the Yud, but the source of all the other creations is actually the Yud of light, right? And this is similar to what scientists say today, that there was a Big Bang theory, Big Bang in the beginning of the source of the world, which we call creation. And we say also the first creation was light. And once you have light, which is energy, and the scientists talk about physical energy, we add to that the spiritual energy. That's what gives the life to everything else in the world. That's what makes it live. And therefore the Yud is the beginning of the actual process of creation. That's the Yehi Or, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or. And the Or is the source of all the other things that come afterwards. So let's try and bring this all together now, because the ideas are similar, but they do differ a little bit. And I'm going to try now envelop them in one general idea. The Yud is a symbol of Hashem. God's name, Yud, K, Vav, K, that's how we write it, begins with the Yud, and that symbolizes Hashem. Okay? The Yud, because it's Hashem, he's got the ability to to make himself small, to make himself modest, so that he can become the seed, so to speak, of everything else in the world. And he's the source. The little Yud is the source and of all the other forces around us. And from him, everything just expands. The Yud turns into a Yad and expands like the Zroa Netuyah, God's hand, stretching out and saving us from Egypt. The Yud becomes a Vav and then becomes a Dalet in one dimension, in two dimensions, eventually expanding to include the whole world. And even though it expands all the time, it's connected to the single point, and therefore it's 1 unit of 10. And that's the small dot that cannot be split. And that is the modesty, the greatness in the modesty, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, even more so obviously Hashem, if I compare them, that because the Yud is so great, we don't comprehend it, it's so small but actually it's the source that expands to everything else in the world. And we said, because of that, it has 2 parts. It spreads upwards, it spreads downwards. In other words, it's the connection of spirituality, physicality coming together, and it's the source of all the creation. With that, we'll move on to, as we normally do, a few extra related points about the Yud that will hopefully enhance our understanding a little bit more. So first of all, as I always do, I quote the Gemara in the Masechet Shabbat about the children who give the drashot on the letters. And if you do the right thing, right, if you gomel chasadim, that was the Gimel Dalet that we said, a whole lot of good things will happen to you. And one of the good things is when we get to the letter Yud, noten lecha Yerusha, right? That's the Yud of of the Yerusha. You highlighted there. Okay, and Yerusha we know is an inheritance. What is an inheritance? It's something that started from somewhere, from a father or grandfather, and it extends and goes from next generation. It's eternity. And hopefully won't get finished up in that generation, and we'll go to the next generation, just like the Yud that extended from the Yud to the Vav to the Dalet, or the hand that extended into the arm and stretched out. We spoke already about the minyan of 10, making it a complete unit. Another interesting point is that a tefach is a measurement, approximately the size of the hand, about 10 centimeters. And a lot of measurements, basic measurements, are 10 tefachim, 10 units of a tefach. And for example, the Gemara in Sukkah talks about Hashem's presence can come very, very close to the earth, but will always stay 10 tefachim above the earth. Many of the vessels of the temple and of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, were 10 tefachim high. Okay, when we build a sukkah, if you have a wall that's 10 tefachim high, it doesn't have to be any higher. It's as if it goes even higher. The idea is that once you have 10, you have completeness, and then you can extend it beyond the 10. Something that we mentioned before when we discussed the letter Hey, that the pasuk says, "Itchu b'Hashem adei ad," trust Hashem, "Ki b'yah Hashem tzura olamim." Literally translate the key in the name of God, Yud Hey. Hashem is the rock of the worlds. But the rabbis explain that this to mean Ki b'yah, the olamim, the two worlds, the world to come in this world, were created with the two letters Yud and Hey. Hey, this world was created with a Hey, which at the time we explained is like a Dalet. It's got expansion and it's got the ability to do tshuva, the little window on the top. And the world to come is the Yud, because it's a little dot. And again, like Hashem, something we don't really understand, we don't really comprehend in this world, the world to come, but it's there and it's actually the source of this world. So that's again something to do with the letter Yud. It's interesting that man in Breshit also, the next verse after the one we mentioned earlier, is creation is written with two Yuds. Normally Vayitzer, he will create, is written with one Yud. But Vayitzer, when it talks about Adam, talking about the creation of man, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam afar min ha'adama vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim vayhi Adam lenefesh chaya. It's written with two Yuds. And the rabbi said that there's two parts, there's two Yuds in the man. There's the Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara, positive inclination and the negative inclination. And these are the two Yuds. Each of them has an aspect of godliness. Even the negative inclination is taking the koach of the godliness and expressing it in a negative way, but nevertheless showing them the two aspects of the man. I mentioned earlier that the Yiddish word for Yid is Jew, right? And that's also similar to the word Yud, right? Which is and the Pintele Yid. That's no matter how far a Jew. Sometimes you see a Jew and you wonder, is this really a Jew? The way he's behaving, whatever, and then some situation will show that he's a Jew, right? Showing very special. I remember one of the stories we learned at school, even about. One of the great rabbis, he had a dream that a certain Jew was going to be his neighbor in the world to come. And he had decided he's got to meet this Jew, and he went and he traveled, whatever, and he met this big, fat Jew who didn't behave like a Jew and ate like a pig and was big gazunta, always eating, and he couldn't understand, like, oh, he was such a righteous person. What kind of partner did he why did he deserve such a partner in this world? And then the story goes on to explain that what this man said to him eventually, why he eats so much, is because his father was killed by one of the pogroms and was burnt at the altar. And he wants to make sure that if that ever happens to him, he's going to be so big and enormous that if that happens to him, the fire will be so great that they'll know that they killed a Jew. So it's a special story that just shows that no matter how far a Jew is, you always see it, right? And I think we see it all the time. There have been stories of sometimes people in the army. You think they're so far away and they're cynical and whatever, and then they do the acts of bravery like, no other person can do. And that's the pintalayid. That's the little point that it's so small, it's so inside you, yet it's so powerful that when it needs to, it comes out. And the final point is that I saw this in one of the books I'd never noticed before, that most of the fathers, especially those that the nation is named after, all begin with the letter Yud. Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yisrael, Yeshurun, and Yehudi, Yehuda, Yehudi, telling us that the Yud is just like the starting point, just like the Yehior, the starting of all creations. So that's the Yud, the letter that's the source of everything and expands to everything, symbolizing Hashem. And basically is everything that we are, and that's why the Yud is the basis of all the letters in the alphabet, as we said in the beginning. So we'll stop there unless there are any questions. In which case, I will turn off the recording.